You know, you don't have to read every single book that's ever been published. I kind of need to tell myself that. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am taking you through some of the books that are on my anti-TBR. These are the books that I have absolutely zero interest in picking up, and I know that there are going to be some books on here that people genuinely fall in love with and that people have genuinely loved, but they just don't do anything for me. As you would expect from my reading tastes, quite a few of these are going to be fantasy books, quite a few of these are going to be horror books, but they are all just books that, for some reason or another, do not appeal to me in any way. First up is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I did try and read this a couple of years ago. I got a sample for it on my Kindle, and nothing really dragged me into the story. I know that this is a big fantasy book, but it has got a kind of a historical fiction element to it. It is about Addie LaRue, who sells her soul to the devil in exchange for immortality, but it does come with a clause. The devil has decided that whatever room Addie goes into, as soon as she leaves the room or as soon as she stops talking to people, they are instantly going to forget who she is. She is going to leave absolutely zero mark on society. And this all continues until about 200 or 300 years later when she meets Henry and he remembers who she is. It does sound like something that I would be really interested in. And again, because it starts in about the 1700s, it does have a kind of an element that I'm interested in, but I just could not get into this book. Next up is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, and my Twilight era is completely done and over with and in the grave. I have no interest in going back to Twilight. I have absolutely zero interest in reading it all from Edward's point of view. I haven't even watched some of the later films. I don't even think I've read the last two books. I think I actually stopped at Eclipse. So I just think this isn't going to be a story that interests me. I don't particularly need to go back to that world again. I don't particularly want to go back to that era of my teenage years where I was really obsessed with the Twilight stories. I remember going to the hairdresser, and when they offered a magazine, I was like, no thank you, and then took out the entire book of New Moon and sped through it while like my hair dye was setting or something. I just have absolutely no interest in going back to that. Another series from my teenage years that I do not wish to go back to is The Hunger Games, because I don't have any interest in reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Big reason for not wanting to read this is that I have no interest in a villain origin story. I know that this is the story of President Snow, of his childhood. I think he was in The Hunger Games at some stage of his life. I just don't want to hear about what happened to him and why he turned into the person that he was and where he grew up and what the contributing factors to his life now are. I've never been interested in a villain origin story. It's never something that I instantly get drawn to. It's not something that I would ever seek out. So it's definitely not something that's going to adorn my shelves anytime soon. Another one that's not going to be found on my shelves again anytime soon is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I will admit that I did have a copy of this a couple of years ago. I tried it out, and then when I figured out that this wasn't the book for me, I instantly gave it to a friend of mine. She's Dutch, and she said that she saw a lot of similarities between Rotterdam and I think it's Ketterdam is the kind of comparison in this story. And she was really drawn into it, so much so that she actually went out like 2 days later, because she'd finished it, and went out to buy Crooked Kingdom and inhaled it. I just didn't get it. I know that this book is so beloved, and I know that there are so many people who've loved it and who obsessed over the Shadow and Bone series, which I think is either a prequel series or a sequel series. When that came out on Netflix, and they were so enthralled by the story and engrossed in watching it, but that just wasn't me. I just didn't have any interest in what was happening in this book or what was happening to these characters. And I know that it's kind of a heist story, but that excitement and that kind of questioning never really appealed to me either. A really beloved book that I am 100% not going to pick up is A Little Life by Hanya Nagahara. I am not interested in trauma porn. I am not interested in a book that everybody says is going to make me sob. There are books, of course, that I'll go into and that will unexpectedly make me cry. And there are books that I'll go into where I'll feel some big feelings while I'm reading it. But I don't want to go into a story where I know that it's going to take my feelings and absolutely batter them into complete oblivion. I know that there are so many people who have read this, and I know that there are so many people who've loved it, but I am just not interested in treating myself that way. If you also don't want to read it, but you kind of want to know what the story is about, I know that Emma from Drinking by Myself, before she stopped posting on her channel, she put up a kind of a chapter by chapter or part by part analysis of what the story of A Little Life is. So if you want to find out what happens, but you don't want to subject yourself to the torture of actually putting your feelings through it, maybe go watch that video. Two books by the same author that I have no interest in reading are It and The Shining, both by Stephen King. If I'm being realistic, I probably don't want to read any of the Stephen King books, apart from one. I've already read and I've already loved 11/22/63, which is a story of a man going back in time to try and stop the assassination of JFK. I was so enthralled by this book, and it was quite sci-fi heavy, which I didn't expect to love, because I'm not necessarily a big sci-fi girly. So when I did fall in love with the story, I thought maybe I should go and check out another couple of Stephen King books. But I know what Stephen King is like as an author. I know that a lot of his stories are filled with blood and gore and murders, and that's not something that I'm interested in. I'm also not a big horror movie person, so I don't think that a lot of his back catalogue is going to work for me. If I were to read one more Stephen King book, I think it would probably be The Ballad of Rita Hayworth, which is the novella or short story upon which The Shawshank Redemption is based, and that is by far one of my favourite films of all time. So I think it would be really interesting to go back and read the origin story of that and then try and compare it with the film itself. But as of now, I don't think I'm going to reach for another Stephen King. A super hyped up book that I have absolutely zero interest in picking up is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I have heard that she describes this book as 3 separate books all crammed together in one. And I know that The Orange Tree is about 800 to 900 pages long. Honestly, at this stage, if you've got a book that's long, but it can logistically be separated into the 3 parts, separate it into the 3 parts and sell it as those 3, or bind them together in like a box that you used to get, like a collection box of the story. But I am just not interested in holding that sort of a size of book up all day and all night. I don't have the upper body strength, but also I'm not very interested in dragon stories. I'm not very interested in fantasy stories like that. So I just don't think that it's one I'm going to pick up. Those are the books that are on my anti-TBR, the ones that I will never be seen reaching for. Are there any books of those that are also on your anti-TBR, or do you have a completely different set on there? If you would love to leave me a comment but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me the red X emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.